Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 3, of course, lecture 3. And I'm going to just tell you right off the bat, this is probably the longest lecture that we have in regards to length of slides. The lecture itself can be confusing for those who have issues with, nouns, pronouns, adverbs, adjectives, all that kind of good stuff. Don't feel super frustrated getting, all this information at once. There will be questions on tests, but they're not going to be the kind that are super confusing. They'll be pretty intuitive in regards to what you learn, but they'll be super, I guess you could say, everyday life type examples in your tests. So while they might be challenging here and there, it's not going to be overly challenging to the point where you can't figure it out. So with that, let's jump into language skills. So the objectives of this chapter 3 or lecture 3, it's not really chapter 3. They're deferring chapters. Make sure you look at your course schedule to make sure you know which chapters it is. I think it's 4 and 5, if I remember off the top of my head. But the objectives, of course, is to identify parts of speech, to distinguish between sentences and fragments, because a lot of people at times write in fragments and do not realize it. That's really important for communication. The third thing that we need to learn is we want to give examples of nominative and objective pronoun forms. And then fourthly and finally, understand how and when to use conjunctions. Conjunctions, you should know what that is, and, but, all that kind of stuff. We'll go over it soon. So the parts of speech are labeled as nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. We're going to go over all of those throughout the slides. How about common and proper nouns? When you talk about nouns, there's common and proper. Proper. If you're talking about a person, it's Mr. Arnold. Mr. Arnold is also a manager, but that's a pretty common noun because it's not identifiable. Places. How about the Rocky Mountains? Beaches are, on the other hand, going to be different. Mountains, on the other hand, will be a common noun because they're multiple. Things, I'm sure you already know this. We're not going to go into it. Ideas, concepts, and qualities, same thing. Broadly, common nouns are broad. Proper nouns are very subjective in regards to talking about an individual or an object specifically. So pronouns, let's jump into that. So nouns are pretty easy. Pronouns are a little bit more difficult. There are words that replace nouns. So I, you, she, he, it, we, me, her, us, them, and on and on. Pronouns, of course, add a variety to our speech, and they're really intuitive in our language capacity. Transitioning from pronouns to verbs, I'm sure all of you know what verbs are. Verbs are actions, conditions, or a state of being. So they express action, state of being, like I said, or condition, and then obvious actions are action verbs. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. So far, so good. Don't feel overwhelmed. I'm sure you've all learned this before. If you haven't and it's new, I think you'll pick up on it quick. I know dental hygiene students are always super bright, so I have a lot of faith in you in this process. Adjectives describe nouns and pronouns by limiting or making more specific the noun or pronoun. So another word for limiting is modifying. So let's talk about it a little bit. What kind of hectic schedule? So a hectic schedule would be, something that you would say in regards to your day potentially. Hectic would be your adjective. Interesting interview. Interesting would be your adjective. Expensive furniture. Expensive, of course, adjective. Crazy animal. Crazy would be your adjective. So you talk about which one in relation to that. Her former supervisor. That car. Those computers. So pretty simple in regards to adjectives. Just make sure you remember it describes nouns and pronouns. And of course, describes them by limiting or making them more specific. All right. Adverbs are also modifiers, which mean they describe something or limit something. So adverbs are modifiers that describes or limits. Adjectives, verbs, or other adverbs. So adverbs modify, adjectives explain. Or adjectives, just to make sure we have it correct, they describe by limiting or making more specific. Not really explain, but limiting or making more specific, just to clarify that. Prepositions. They're connecting words in relation to nouns and pronouns. Prepositional phrase, if you're able to pronounce that. By the bus terminal. For would be for us, for Caitlin. Make sure you remember prepositions and highlight that. Not going to be a ton of test questions on this, but I want to make sure you're aware. Conjunctions, of course, join words, phrases, or clauses. And is a conjunction. The team members did not go to the meeting, but they went to the gym. But would be the conjunction. So, but combine the two sentences, and combine the two sentences above. I think conjunctions are probably the easiest thing to remember. So, when you're looking at it, I think conjunctions is be something that you grasp pretty quickly. I do. Adjectives, adverbs, those are the ones I sometimes have more trouble with, so make sure you study those the most. So we're going to talk about this. Identify each word in the parentheses and label it either a preposition or a conjunction. So I want you to go through this individually to identify which one's a preposition, which one's a conjunction. I think it'll be really helpful for you to just highlight it and make sure everything works the way that your mind thinks it does. So make sure you know what you're really, I guess you could say, what you've studied. So go over this, make sure you're good to go. Interjections, of course, we talked about that a little bit longer. They can express strong feelings. Here's an example of an interjection. Congratulations. All your hard work has finally paid off handsomely. So note in that sentence, the interjection is congratulations. Wow, I never dreamed I would get a sales award. Wow would be, of course, your interjection. That's something that I forget quite often. It could be a one-word kind of sentence. So those are interjections because they stop what you were talking about beforehand and kind of split your sentence up. Another exercise. So make the following sentence more descriptive by inserting an appropriate adjective in each of the blanks. So what I would recommend doing just in these two examples, why don't you just pause the video and make sure you understand everything as it's highlighted. I'm not going to give you the answers because I feel like that would do you a disservice and people would just watch it. Why don't you look at this, make sure you know the answers, and if you have any questions, reach out. But I'm sure you can figure it out based on the PowerPoint, what you've read in the chapters, and then what we've gone over so far. Here's another example. Identifying, like, what would fantastic be? Interjection, of course, right? So make sure you identify the underlying words. This is just some examples that you might see in tests. So I think it's pretty reasonable for you to ask to pause this. Make sure you go over it as much as possible. I had a chance to review this. Let's move on. Nouns and pronouns. I've already talked about this a little bit, but subject. Who is speaking, who has been spoken to, and who or what is spoken about. Let's talk about a compound subject. It's two or more subjects joined by a conjunction, such as and, but, or, nor. Some examples are compound subject. So the mechanics, sorry for my speech, I need to work on my communication, I guess, this morning. The mechanics and techniques at our local plant have requested additional safety procedures. So the complete subject is the mechanics and the technicians at our plant. There are two main words in this complete subject, the mechanics and technicians, of course, which are joined by a conjunction and the compound subject is mechanics and technician. So two or more subjects joined by a conjunction. Compound subject. I'm going to move a little quickly because this slideshow has quite a bit. A predicate is a part of a sentence that tells what the subject is or does and what is done to the subject. So the simple predicate is the main verb of the sentence. For example, Miss Carswell will organize the teams for a competition. The simple predicate is will organize, which is what Miss Carswell will do. The complete predicate is will organize the teams for the competition. Not a lot of questions on this, but make sure you have a broad understanding of it. Here's another thing that you could pause. Make sure you check your thought process so you understand it. Pretty simple. I think you probably will pick it up pretty quickly. Normal order of a sentence is the subject first and then the predicate. Here's some examples. 3 members of management were at last night's meeting concerning health benefits. The complete subject is 3 members of management because it came first, right? The complete subject precedes the complete, well, it's not supposed to say page 95. That's an error in the PowerPoint, but in the predicate, because this was copied and pasted, of course, from your book. But That's a good example right there. Sorry for the error. Types of sentences, of course, super easy: declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory. I'm sure exclaiming you've heard before, so it expresses strong feeling. Imperative as a command or request. It's imperative that you do this. Think about that word. Interrogative is asking a question, and declarative is making a statement. Make sure you understand this. What do you think these are? Pause it, check your thought process. How about a clause? It's a group of words containing both a subject and a predicate. If the clause expresses a complete thought and can stand alone as a complete sentence, it is an independent clause, of course, independent clause. I'm not going to go through this, but take time to read it. Pause the PowerPoint. Talks about predicates and independent clauses. I don't want to run out of time here because we do have some slides left. How about a fragment? This is something that people need to really, really make sure that they don't write in regards to your APA paper that's going to come up. Randy wants to attend the seminar because the topic is how to create web pages. That's a complete thought, of course. What would be a fragment? Let's give an example. A fragment would be something that is not a complete sentence. So an example would be of a fragment. There are a couple of points left to discuss, period. The start date and the title, period. A fragment would, of course, be the start date and the title. It's an incomplete sentence. You need to combine those in some way or form. Verbs that describe an action, condition, or state of being. Of course, you know this: present, past, past participle, and present participle. Participles are a little confusing. Don't take a lot of time to study and know these, but you should have a broad idea of what they are. Present and past tense, of course, I'm sure you'll be able to pick up on very, very quickly. Principal verb, past tense, present participle, and past participle. We really went over that. Make sure you read the diagram and read chapter 4 and 5. Another example here, if you want to take a look in regards to knowing it, pause the video, make sure you have an understanding. If you have questions, let me know. Forming possessive pronouns. So noun type, possessive would be adding an S versus adding an apostrophe and an S. So make sure you understand like bosses, Joneses, Patrick's information. That forms those rules of ownership. Conjunctions. We've really already talked about conjunctions, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that because I want to leave a few minutes at the end to talk about something. Conjunctions a little bit further, make sure you understand what they mean and what they're about. Conjunction pitfalls, not really something that's super, super important, but something to know in the back of your head as you're reading the book. Another bit of information in regards to the PowerPoint, you could pause it to make sure you have conjunctions figured out. And then here's some more pieces. You can pause it, look at it, or you can look at the PowerPoint on your own. Conjunctive adverbs. I'm not going to really dive into this in extreme detail. Likewise, accordingly, more, however, those are things that are conjunctive adverbs, and they can split a sentence in half, but something that you can look at on your own. And then compound adjectives, air-conditioned buses, one-year contract, something that usually is hyphenated for you to take a look at. Looking at week 3, I appreciate all the work you've done in week 1 and 2 review. I think they're going really well. Make sure you comment it back and forth with your peers, just talking about, what they thought about the posts, especially in this chapter, how to improve writing. I think there's some good tips that others might have, because some are better than others in regards to their grammar and how they structure words. I'm going to tell you for myself personally, I have trouble at times identifying, parts of speech and such. I'm a really good writer, and I understand how a sentence should be structured, but I don't think about it in the deep detail that you learn in like English 101. But that's something that you should study now just to make sure you're ready to go in the future. Grammar is really, really, really important, of course, as you can tell from the picture I have listed here. So make sure you concentrate on this, and if you have any questions as you're going through the chapters, let me know. The midterm will be up here pretty soon, and have quiz 1 coming up in regards to submitting your mission statement or cover letter. So I appreciate all your efforts, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for all you're doing, and make sure you have a great week and stay positive. Thanks so much.